Church life is full of jargon. And for someone like myself who has been coming to church since I was 8 days old, it can be easy to become blissfully unaware of just how much we use special church language. The problem with jargon words is that we can unwittingly exclude people, which is the last thing we should want to do as a church. Almost every part of human life has special words that relate only to that area, or words that are used in that context with particular nuance and meaning that is different to how those words are used in everyday life. I can remember when I was studying musical composition at university that every would-be composer was not so much judged on the quality of their music so much as their ability to describe their music using words such as juxtaposition, God, I can barely get it out, juxtaposition, permeation, and most importantly of all, climax. A musical climax is important. Jargon can function as a secret language which marks the boundary of a community. Those who understand the jargon belong to that community. However, by failing to understand how the language of a community is being used, one soon realizes that you do not belong. Jargon is not a bad thing in of itself, but these are dynamics we need to be aware of. If someone comes into our community, we need to think about the language we use and what our use of language may imply. Does our language suggest to newcomers that they belong, or maybe they don't? Maybe it's a mixture of both, with some things providing invitation and an opportunity to join in, whereas other words simply drift over people's heads. Today, there is a particular jargon word I want to talk a little bit about because I think that even within the church it is widely misunderstood. And the word I'm referring to is mission. The word mission is often thrown about within church communities, often with little clarity as to what is being spoken of. For some, the word mission corresponds to overseas mission. There's an easy connection to make there, as we do have a church group called the Anglican Board of Missions, which is primarily concerned with supporting missionary work throughout the world. At diocesan synods and other church gatherings, I'm often acutely aware of the way mission is spoken of. I note how mission seems to have replaced the word ministry to refer to the work of the church. I can live with that, but a problem seems to arise when many people understand mission as broadly referring to the activity of the church, while others clearly understand mission as referring to evangelism, that work of spreading Christianity through sharing the gospel. Yes, again, there is a connection between mission and evangelism, but mission means much, much more than that. Some years ago, a particular group clarified just what the mission of this church is, which is where we get a thing called the fivefold mission statement. 5 statements trying to describe what the business of the church really is. So 2 of those things I've just mentioned are covered by that statement. The first of the 5 points is to proclaim the good news. That's sharing the Jesus story. Point 2 says our job is to teach, baptize, and nurture new believers. So those understandings are part of this word mission, but it goes on to say much more. Point 3, to respond to human need by loving service. That makes a whole lot of sense in terms of what the church should be doing. It's the love your neighbour clause, which is a fundamental aspect of Christian action. Point 4 is one that I warm to more than some of the others, and it says, our job as a church is to seek to transform the unjust structures of society, to challenge violence of every kind, and to pursue peace and reconciliation. I'm not saying I'm particularly good at any of those things, but they are certainly aspirational. But today it's actually the 5th point that I want to talk about, because it is at times the aspect of the work of the church that the church often forgets about. It says that we are to strive to safeguard the integrity of creation and sustain and renew the life of the earth. What this final point affirms is that as Christians, part of our faithful work in the world is to care for the earth itself. Christ called us to love our neighbour, and let's be honest, we don't tend to think of that commandment as, we tend to think of it as referring to other people. But our neighbours are also animals, plants, the air we breathe, the water we drink. Our lives are deeply connected with the environment, and it is right to love it as much as we love each other. As we know, there are plenty of environmental issues that we should be concerned about. Today I'm going to focus on one, but more importantly, rather than simply telling you about the problem, I'm going to tell you what each and every one of you can do about it. A couple of years ago, a family member of mine, a cousin, had a somewhat comical rant about how he had no interest in saving pandas. His argument essentially was that while pandas might be cute and cuddly, they don't contribute to the world beyond being cute. He was far more interested in supporting animal welfare groups that were concerned about less poster-friendly animals, like bees. Now, I don't think those concerned with environmental issues should abandon attempts to save endangered species. I'm glad there are people out there trying to save the pandas, our whales, our native bird population. Those are all very good things. But we certainly need to make saving bees a top priority. There is a quote often misattributed to Albert Einstein, which claims that were the honeybee to go extinct, humanity would perish within 4 years. This claim is not entirely inaccurate. It certainly draws our attention to the simple truth that humans and bees have evolved in ways that have deeply intertwined our respective destinies. Without honeybee and bumblebee pollination, which, believe it or not, is actually supported quite well these days by the fly population, we would lose most of the food that sustains human life. If bees were to disappear, we would face global starvation. That's why we should be concerned that for a variety of reasons, not all of which are fully understood, bee populations across the world have been in sharp decline. For example, wild bee populations in Europe have almost entirely vanished. As bee populations have declined, our dependency on human beekeepers has increased dramatically. The good news is that humans have been living with bees and working with them for thousands of years. There is evidence that Egyptians were keeping bees long before the time of Moses. Over the centuries, we have learnt a great deal about the complexity of bee life and how we can support them. So here in the centre of our round this morning is a beehive. It's okay, it's empty now. But sometime in the next few weeks, a new colony will be placed into this hive, and they will begin to grow and produce a number of things. Inside that hive, bees will create wax, something called propolis, more bees. It's a key thing they're quite concerned about is more bees, but also royal jelly. They will store nectar and pollen, and all things going well, come January, there will be enough honey for them and some surplus for me as well. I am an advocate for ethical beekeeping, meaning that I do not rob them of all of their honey. Ethical beekeeping is about partnership, not exploitation. Now, when I began talking about the mission of the church, that part some of you may have fallen asleep during, I doubt that any of you thought that bees and the keeping of bees might actually be part of that mission. But when put in perspective, by seeing how important bees are to the welfare of all human life and more besides, we can see that such an activity can be an act of faith. Now, I did say that this part of the mission of the church was something that all of you can do, but I'm yet to tell you exactly how. I'm not suggesting that you all get hives and start looking after bees, although some of you might already do that. Do we have any other beekeepers here this morning? No one wants to own up to that. Most of us don't really fancy the prospect of stings, even if we like the idea of honey. And I hate to say it, bee stings are just part of beekeeping life. However, I do want to draw to your attention that on Friday of this last week, a box not of honeybees, but of bumblebees was placed at the top of our bell tower. The hive was opened, and that is where their home will be for the next 8 or so weeks. They will slowly, and trust me, it's very slow. We all imagine that opening up a beehive will be quite spectacular, but bumblebees are very slow to make any progress at all. You open the door and 1 or 2 clumsily fly out after about half an hour, and that's about as spectacular as it gets. But as they warm up, they will be more active, and they will start heading off around the neighbourhood and begin that work of pollination. And bumblebees are extremely good at this job. As I said, in about 8 weeks' time, something will change. These bumblebees on our roof will produce a number of queens. And those queens will fly out around our community and establish wild hives. And they will continue to pollinate plants in this area. And after another 8 weeks or so, there will be more and more hives created throughout our city. So that's something we have done as a community this week. As a community, we are helping re-establish a bumblebee population in our city. But there is another thing you can do to support bees, which is even simpler. There is no point in anyone having a beehive unless there is enough pollen, nectar, and water in our local area to support the bees. Those three things are the lifeblood of a healthy beehive. The good news is that many of you have some sort of garden and enjoy planting a range of things throughout the year. What I'm challenging you to consider is that when you get into the garden in these nice warming up spring days over the next few weeks, that maybe you consider planting some things that will help the bees in your area. While most plants produce something of use to bees, some plants produce better pollen or nectar than others. Take the time to find out which plants are bee-friendly and maybe add some of those to your home environment. Simply put, today's lesson is that participating in the mission of the church, being part of the work of sustaining life in our world, of caring for creation, can be as simple as planting some marigolds. Amen.